"You don't belong here, go home, little girl." He said it into her face, loud enough for 1,000 soldiers to hear. Then he smiled that slow, ugly smirk of a man who has never once been wrong about his own power. His hand came up. The slap cracked across the field like a gunshot. 1,040 soldiers stopped breathing. Then, something happened that none of them would ever forget for the rest of their lives. The woman didn't fall. She didn't flinch. She turned back, and in less than 3 seconds, Commander Brett Harlan, 11 combat deployments, 32 commendations, was unconscious in the dirt. She hadn't even put down her coffee. If this story already has your heart pounding good, subscribe to this channel, follow this story all the way to the end, and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see exactly how far this story travels. The morning it happened, nobody at Fort Carson thought it would be the kind of day they'd still be talking about 20 years later. It was supposed to be a routine joint readiness exercise. 1,400 soldiers cycling through drills, brass watching from the observation deck, the whole thing running like a machine that nobody was allowed to question. 1,040 were assembled for the final phase, a combined evaluation in the Eastern Field. An audience mostly. There to watch. There to be evaluated. The woman who arrived that morning didn't arrive in uniform. She arrived in a plain gray jacket, civilian trousers, and boots that had seen more miles than most soldiers in that field had lived years. She carried a single manila folder under her arm and a cup of gas station coffee in her other hand. She didn't introduce herself to anyone. She walked straight to the edge of the field, found a position near the fence line, and stood there watching. Sergeant First Class Danny Ruiz was the first one to notice her. "Hey, Hendricks," he muttered, leaning toward the man beside him without turning his head. "Who's the woman by the east fence?" Corporal James Hendricks squinted. "Some Pentagon type, I heard. Civilian assessment team." "She's just standing there." "Yeah." "Shouldn't somebody tell her where to go?" "Somebody already tried," Hendricks said quietly. "She didn't move." That was the first thing people would remember about Elena Voss. She didn't move when you expected her to. Bataille. Commander Brett Harlan noticed her 17 minutes after she arrived. He was walking the perimeter with his executive officer, Lieutenant Commander Pete Solis, going over the afternoon's evaluation timeline when he saw her standing there with her coffee like she owned the 40 yards of fence line she'd claimed. He stopped walking. "Who cleared her for this section?" he said. Solis checked his clipboard. "She's listed as a civilian assessment liaison, DOD contractor, Dr. Elena Voss." "Doctor?" Harlan repeated the word, landing like something he'd stepped in. "Yes, sir." "She's a doctor." "That's what the paperwork says." Harlan looked at her for a long moment. She hadn't looked back at him. She was watching the field like she was reading a language no one else in that area spoke. Her eyes moved in a patterned, systematic patient covering sectors, like she was running a tactical assessment in her head while drinking bad coffee. It irritated him more than it should have. "I'll handle it," he said. Solis started to say something. He didn't finish. Harlan walked across the field toward her like a man who had never once in his life been wrong about another person. He stopped 4 feet away. She still hadn't looked at him. "Ma'am?" His voice was flat, the way a man's voice gets when he's decided the conversation is already over. "This section is restricted to authorized military personnel during active evaluation phases. I'm going to need you to relocate to the civilian observation area." Elena Voss turned and looked at him. She was 51 years old, 5'7", with gray threading through dark hair. She kept pulled back and eyes that were the particular shade of calm that comes not from peace, but from having survived things that would have destroyed calmer people. She took a sip of her coffee. "I'm exactly where my authorization says I'm supposed to be, Commander," she said. "But thank you." She turned back to the field. Harlan felt something tighten in his jaw. "Your authorization," he said slowly, "was signed by a deputy undersecretary who has no operational jurisdiction over this exercise. I have operational jurisdiction over this exercise." You have operational jurisdiction over the personnel in this exercise, she said, still watching the field. Not over the evaluation of it. The silence that followed was the kind that spreads outward like a stone dropped in still water. The nearest soldiers heard it. They didn't look, but they heard. Harlan took one step closer. I'm going to say this once. You are a civilian contractor. I am a United States Navy SEAL commander with 11 combat deployments and 32 commendations. You do not tell me what jurisdiction covers what on my field. Noted, Elena said. I want you to relocate, now. I'm sure you do. It was the flatness of it that did it. Not defiance, something worse. Indifference, like he was a minor inconvenience she'd already filed away and forgotten. Lady, he said, and his voice dropped. I don't know who you think you are, but you don't belong here. Go back to your desk and file your little reports. He let it hang in the air for exactly 1 second. Then he raised his hand and slapped her an open palm strike across the left side of her face, sharp and deliberate, and intended to humiliate in front of every soldier close enough to see it. The sound cracked across the field like a starter's pistol. 1,040 soldiers went stone still. Elena's head turned with the impact. The coffee cup dropped from her hand. Her eyes closed for exactly 1 second. Harlan was already smirking when they opened. He never saw what happened next. Her right elbow connected with his jaw at an angle that used his own forward lean against him. Her left hand caught his wrist, rotated it in a direction it was not designed to go, and used the resulting collapse of his center of gravity to put his full body weight into the ground. He was unconscious before he finished falling. The whole sequence took 2.8 seconds. Commander Brett Harlan. 11 deployments, 32 commendations, lay face up in the dirt out cold in front of 1,040 soldiers. Elena Voss bent down, picked up her coffee cup, straightened, and looked at the assembled crowd. Nobody moved. She looked at Lieutenant Commander Solis, who was standing 12 feet away, with an expression that suggested his brain had temporarily stopped processing information. You'll want to call the medics, she said calmly. He's going to need his jaw looked at. Then she turned back to the field and kept watching. The medics came. The brass came faster. Colonel David Marsh reached the field at a near run, 3 aides behind him, his face the particular color of a man whose carefully planned day has just detonated. What happened? He said. It wasn't a question. Lieutenant Commander Solis opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. Commander Harlan. I can see Commander Harlan Solis. What happened? Solis looked at Elena, looked back at Marsh. He struck the civilian liaison, sir, she responded. Marsh turned to look at Elena Voss for the first time. She turned to look at him. Something moved across his face. It was fast a flicker there and gone. But Sergeant Ruiz, standing close enough to see it, would later describe it as the expression of a man who has just realized he is standing in a much larger situation than he thought. Ma'am, Marsh said carefully, I'm Colonel David Marsh, commanding officer of this installation. Colonel? I'd like to understand what just happened. Your commander struck me, Elena said. I neutralized the threat. It's fairly straightforward. You... Marsh stopped. He looked at Harlan, who was now being attended to by 2 medics, beginning to come around groaning. He looked back at Elena. You put a Navy SEAL commander on the ground in under 3 seconds. 3 seconds is generous, she said. You'll want to pull the security footage if you want the exact number. Who are you? It was the right question. It was the question everyone in earshot was asking themselves, just without the rank to voice it out loud. Elena opened her manila folder, removed a single card, handed it to Marsh. He looked at it. The color that had been in his face when he arrived did not exactly leave. It did something more complicated than leaving. It rearranged. Lieutenant Colonel, he said quietly. Retired, she said. You're Elena Voss. I am. He looked at the card again, then at her. You were first SFODD. The words fell into the air and stayed there. First SFODD. Delta Force. The unit whose existence the Army spent 40 years officially denying. The unit you didn't get into unless you had already survived things that would have ended most careers. Around them close enough to hear soldiers were running calculations in their heads. Delta Force. Retired lieutenant colonel. Civilian clothes. She had put a SEAL commander on the ground in less than 3 seconds without spilling the rest of her coffee. Ruiz leaned toward Hendricks. Pentagon type, he muttered. Don't say a word, Hendricks whispered back. Brett Harlan regained consciousness in stages. Sound first, the low murmur of activity around him. Somebody's radio crackling. The feeling of the ground under his back. Then the pain. His jaw felt like someone had rearranged it with a wrench. He tried to sit up. One of the medics put a hand on his shoulder. Easy, sir. You've got a... Get your hand off me. He pushed upright. His vision swam. He looked around, taking inventory. Field. Soldiers. Marsh standing nearby, watching him with an expression he couldn't read. And her. She was standing 20 feet away, watching him, the way she'd been watching the field systematic patient, like she was reading something in his face he didn't know was written there. He stood up. The medic started to object. Harlan ignored it. He walked toward her. Every muscle in his body wanted to cover the 20 feet fast, but something in her stillness told him running at her was probably a poor strategy. He stopped 6 feet away. Who the hell are you? He said. I already told Colonel Marsh, Elena said. He can brief you when your jaw stops swelling. I'm asking you. I know. The silence stretched. You hit a superior officer, Harlan said. You hit a retired Lieutenant Colonel Delta Force operator first, Elena said. If you'd like to discuss the chain of events, I'm comfortable with that conversation. Harlan stared at her. Delta. Yes. You're... He stopped. Something was shifting behind his eyes. Not embarrassment. Something more calculated. He studied her face the way a man studies a locked door he's been told not to touch. How long have you been here? 17 minutes before you came to introduce yourself. What are you evaluating? The exercise. Which aspect of the exercise? Elena tilted her head slightly. That's a very specific question, Commander, for a man who 60 seconds ago didn't know who I was. The shift in his eyes stopped, settled, and Elena Voss, who had spent 23 years reading people in rooms where misreading them got you killed, went very, very still inside. She had thought the slap was about ego, about territory, about a man who couldn't tolerate a woman standing on ground he considered his. She was reevaluating that now. Retention. Hook number 1. She filed the moment away, marked it. The way Harlan's anger had moved too fast, too focused, landing on exactly the right questions. He hadn't asked who she was or what she'd done, or whether he was going to press charges. He'd asked what she was evaluating. People who want to know what you're looking at are people who are worried about what you might find. Elena looked at Harlan and thought you knew I was coming. She didn't say it. She handed him nothing. She turned back to the field, resumed her assessment, and let the silence do what silence always does to guilty people. It pressed on him. Colonel Marsh pulled her aside at 1400 hours. His voice was low, tight, the voice of a man managing several fires simultaneously. I need to understand your directive here, Lieutenant Colonel. Officially. My people are asking questions I can't answer. What are they asking? Whether you're here because of the Kessler incident. The name landed flat between them. Elena kept her face neutral. What do you know about the Kessler incident? I know it happened 2 weeks ago. I know 3 soldiers from this installation were listed as witnesses. And I know that whatever they witnessed, their statements haven't been processed through any channel I can identify. That concerns you. It concerns me significantly. She looked at him for a long moment. Marsh was career Army 30 years steady hands. The kind of man who ran clean operations and slept well because his conscience didn't carry debt. He wasn't performing concern. He felt it. Colonel, she said, I'm going to ask you something, and I need a straight answer. Go ahead. Before today, did you know I was coming? He didn't hesitate. No. My first notification was this morning's duty roster listing a civilian assessment liaison. No name, no background. Who prepared the duty roster? Marsh stopped, recalculated. Operations normally. Coordinated by... He stopped again. Something crossed his face. Harlan oversees morning operations coordination. The air between them changed. He knew I was coming, Elena said quietly. That's... Marsh rubbed the back of his neck. That's not necessarily... He struck me within 20 minutes of my arrival. He didn't ask who I was. After I put him down, the first thing he wanted to know was what I was evaluating. She paused. He wasn't defending territory, Colonel. He was trying to remove me from the field. Marsh was quiet for a long time. What happened in the Kessler incident? He finally said. Elena opened her manila folder, removed a single page, handed it to him. He read it. The longer he read, the quieter he became, the specific quiet of a man whose understanding of his world is being systematically revised. Mini-climax sequence. When Marsh finished reading, he set the page down on the folding table between them. He pressed his hand flat on top of it, like he was keeping it from escaping. This is verified, he said. Triple sourced, Elena said. 2 independent analysts and a signals intercept. Then what happened in that valley wasn't a training accident. No. And the 3 witnesses from my installation are the only people outside the chain who can corroborate the intercept. Marsh looked up. His eyes had gone to that particular focused stillness that good commanders get when the situation has become genuinely dangerous and they've accepted that fact completely. Their statements haven't been processed because someone is preventing them from being processed. Someone with the clearance to intercept military communications and the operational access to delay an official inquiry for 14 days without triggering an automatic audit flag, Elena said. That's a very short list of people. Yes, she said. It is. And you came here today to draw them out? Elena's expression didn't change. I came to make an assessment. You came as bait, Marsh said. She didn't confirm it. She didn't deny it. And Harlan took it, Marsh said slowly. Inside 20 minutes. The colonel sat back. His eyes moved to the field outside where his soldiers were going through their drills, following orders, believing in the institution the way you believe in the ground under your feet. The way you stop believing in it when it opens up. What do you need from me? He said. I need the 3 witnesses isolated. Separate quarters, no communication with the unit, no access to outside channels. Tonight. Done. What else? I need access to your operations center's communication logs. Specifically, anything routed through Harlan's coordination channel in the last 14 days. He'll know we pulled them. He already knows he failed, Elena said. The question now is what he does about it. Marsh nodded slowly. He reached for the page, then stopped. This stays between us. That's the only way it works. He stood, straightened his jacket. The hands that had pressed flat on the page were steady. One more question, he said. Go ahead. The Kessler incident, the soldiers who died in that valley. He looked at her directly. Were they mine? Elena held his gaze. One of them was yours. He closed his eyes for exactly 3 seconds. When they opened, the grief that had flashed through them was gone, packed away, somewhere deep and orderly, the way career soldiers pack grief efficiently, because there's always still work to do. I'll get you the logs, he said, and he walked away. Major twist. Elena was alone at the folding table for less than 4 minutes before she wasn't alone anymore. She heard the footsteps unhurried, deliberate, and didn't look up. Lieutenant Colonel Voss. The voice was female, controlled, familiar in the way that voices become familiar when you've heard recordings of them in classified briefings. Elena looked up. The woman standing across the table from her was in civilian clothes, expensive. Understated, the particular kind of understated that costs more than uniform. Late 40s, close-cropped dark hair, a face that gave absolutely nothing away. She was not someone who was supposed to be at Fort Carson. She was not someone who was supposed to be anywhere near this investigation. Deputy Director Calloway, Elena said carefully. This is unexpected, is it? Margaret Calloway pulled out the chair across from Elena and sat. She folded her hands on the table. She had the unhurried manner of someone who has never once been where she wasn't supposed to be, because everywhere she went immediately became somewhere she was supposed to be. You're not in any notification chain for this operation, Elena said. No, Calloway agreed. I'm not. The silence that followed was the loudest kind. The kind where everything unsaid is louder than anything that could be said. How long have you been on installation? Elena said. Long enough to watch the Harlan situation unfold. A small, precise smile. Elegant. You gave him the window and he walked right through it. I didn't know you were watching. That was rather the point. Calloway unfolded her hands, smoothed an invisible wrinkle from her sleeve. You've built a solid picture, Elena. I want you to know that. The witnesses, the communication intercepts, the 14-day delay. Very thorough. Elena said nothing. She was watching Calloway's hands. The way her fingers had stilled too completely after the sleeve adjustment. The micro-tension in her jaw. But here's where we have a problem, Calloway said. The picture you've built, the one that puts Harlan at the center of what happened in Kessler Valley, it's incomplete. Is it? Not because you missed evidence. You're too good to miss evidence. Calloway leaned forward slightly. Because someone has been feeding you a picture, carefully, deliberately, piece by piece, directing exactly where you looked and when. Elena held very still. Harlan isn't your architect, Calloway said. He's a distraction, a loud, stupid distraction who just made himself significantly more useful by assaulting you in front of 1,000 soldiers. She paused. Which means the person who sent him to do it wanted this moment. Wanted you filing an incident report. Wanted the investigation to land on Harlan and stay there. The silence came back longer this time. Elena's voice when it came was careful and low. You're telling me I've been walking a trail someone laid for me. I'm telling you, Calloway said, that the question isn't what Harlan did. The question is who gave him his instructions. Elena looked at her for a long moment. And you know who that is. Calloway held her gaze. I know who it isn't. That's not the same thing. No. The small smile again, precise as a scalpel. But it's where we start. Elena thought about Marsh and his steady hands and his clean conscience and his one soldier in a valley who wouldn't be coming home. She thought about 3 witnesses whose statements had been held in suspended animation for 2 weeks by someone with the access to do it cleanly. She thought about the trail she had followed here, every piece fitting perfectly, which was the thing about trails that were laid for you. They always fit perfectly. Who sent you? Elena said. The same person, Calloway said, who is very much hoping you don't make it to the communication logs before they disappear. Elena was already standing. The operations center, she said. 4 minutes, Calloway said. Maybe less. Elena didn't run. Running attracted attention. But she moved the way Delta operators move when the timeline has compressed and the mission profile has just changed completely fast. Purposeful, absolutely certain. Behind her, Margaret Calloway sat at the folding table, folded her hands again, and watched a woman who thought she had come to Fort Carson to unmask one conspirator walk straight toward the realization that she had just become the most important piece in a game she hadn't known she was playing. Outside, 1,040 soldiers kept drilling in the afternoon sun, following orders, keeping faith with the institution. Unaware that the ground had already opened up, she covered the ground to the operations center in under 90 seconds. Not running. Moving the way you move when speed matters more than anything except not being noticed moving fast, which is its own kind of discipline. The kind Delta drilled into you until it stopped being a technique and became a reflex. The specialist at the operations center door was young, maybe 22, with the look of someone who had been told today would be routine. "Ma'am, this area is..." Elena held up her authorization card without breaking stride. "Log me in." "I need to verify with..." "Log me in or get out of my way. You have 2 seconds to pick." He logged her in. The operations center ran on 3 workstations along the far wall, 2 duty officers and a communications console that handled routing for the entire installation's command traffic. Elena knew the layout from the briefing files she'd read on the drive-in. What she hadn't expected was the 3rd workstation, the one in the far corner, to be active with a duty officer she hadn't seen in any personnel roster sitting in front of it. Fingers moving across a keyboard with the particular speed of someone who is not entering data, but erasing it. She crossed the room in 6 steps. "Step away from that console." The officer, mid-30s sergeant stripes, a face she was already memorizing, turned in his chair. His hands stayed on the keyboard. "Ma'am, I'm running authorized maintenance on..." "Your hands," she said. "Come off that keyboard in the next second, or I will remove them." He looked at her. He looked at her the way people look at you when they're calculating odds. Then he did the math on what had happened to the last person who'd miscalculated those odds today, and he took his hands off the keyboard. Elena stepped in front of the console. The deletion log was still running a cascading sequence of communication records being wiped from the archive timestamp by timestamp starting from 14 days ago. She had been right. 4 minutes. Maybe less. She had made it in 3. She killed the deletion process. The cascade stopped, frozen mid-sequence with 11 days of records already gone and 3 days remaining intact. 3 days. She worked with what she had. "What's your name?" she said, not looking away from the screen. "Sergeant Alan Price." "Who authorized this maintenance, Sergeant Price?" Silence. That was not a rhetorical question. More silence. The loaded kind where the person is running through their options and discovering there aren't any good ones. "I received a standing order," Price finally said. "Flagged communications archive. Scheduled maintenance." "Scheduled by who?" "It came through operations coordination." "Harlan," Elena said. Price said nothing. Which was an answer. She pulled the 3 intact days of communication logs and started moving through them. The records that had been erased were gone. She couldn't reconstruct them here, maybe not at all. But the 3 remaining days formed their own picture, and sometimes the last 3 days of a cover-up tell you more than the 11 that came before. What she found on the first pass stopped her cold. Not a name, a routing signature, a specific flag in the header of a communication that indicated it had passed through a filter she was not supposed to know. Existed a secondary review protocol used by exactly one office in the entire United States intelligence infrastructure. The Office of the Deputy Director, National Clandestine Service. Margaret Calloway's office. Elena leaned back from the screen, kept her face neutral, ran the calculation again because the first time felt wrong. The communication logs that Price had been erasing, the ones Calloway had warned her about, had Calloway's own routing filter embedded in their headers, which meant they hadn't just passed through Calloway's office for review. They had originated there. She left Price in the operations center with strict instructions not to touch anything went outside, and found a position where she could see all 3 approach routes before pulling out her phone. The number she dialed connected in one ring. "Tell me you got there in time," said the voice on the other end, female, older, dry. "I got 3 days," Elena said. "But that's not what I'm calling about." "Talk." "The logs I just saved. They have NCS secondary routing flags." A pause. Short, but Elena heard everything in it. "All of them," the voice said. "Everyone that was still intact." Another pause. Longer. "That's not possible." "I'm looking at it." "Elena." The voice was measured now in the way that voices get measured when the person is managing the gap between what they know and what they're able to say on an open line. Where is Calloway right now? Elena's eyes tracked automatically to the folding table area where she'd left the deputy director. The table was empty. The chair was still pulled out. The folded hands were gone. "She left," Elena said. "When?" "Sometime in the last 4 minutes." "Did she tell you anything before she went?" "She told me Harlan was a distraction, that someone laid a trail for me." Elena paused. She was right about the trail. She just left out which direction it leads. The silence on the other end had a texture now dense, careful the texture of a person constructing and discarding sentences in real time. "How much do you trust Calloway?" the voice finally said. "I don't," Elena said. "But I'm adjusting my understanding of why." "Come in." "I'm not coming in." Elena. "3 witnesses, Vera. Marsh is moving them tonight, but if Calloway's office has been running this routing all along, moving them inside this installation doesn't accomplish anything. I need to know if any of them have already been contacted." The woman named Vera exhaled. "Give me 10 minutes." "You have 5, Elena said. "After that, the picture changes." She ended the call, stood in the open air with the afternoon dropping around her and the distant sound of 1,000 soldiers running drills, and let herself think the thought she'd been refusing to think since the moment she'd seen the routing signature. If Calloway hadn't warned her in time to save something, she would have saved nothing. Calloway had known exactly how long the deletion would take and had timed the warning accordingly, which meant Calloway had wanted her to save 3 days, specifically those 3 days, and not the 11 that had already been wiped. She had been walked to the exact evidence she was supposed to find. Colonel Marsh found her 6 minutes later, coming from the direction of the medical bay, with his jaw set in a way that meant the news was not good. "Harlan is conscious," he said, stopping beside her. "He's already requested JAG." "He'll lawyer up fast," Elena said. "That's fine." "Is it?" "He's not the problem anymore." Marsh looked at her. "You've changed your assessment." "In the last 40 minutes?" "Yes." He was quiet for a moment, reading her face the way experienced commanders learn to read faces, not for what's being shown, but for what's being held back. "The communication logs. I saved 3 days. Price erased 11. Price." His voice went flat. "Alan Price has been on this installation for 8 months. Transferred in from..." He stopped. "From Harlan's last posting." "I know. How did I not know that?" "Because you trusted your vetting process," Elena said. "And someone made sure Price passed it cleanly." Marsh rubbed the back of his neck. In the gesture she saw the particular exhaustion of a man who has just realized the breach in his institution goes further than he thought, and is measuring the distance between what he can control and what has already happened beyond his reach. "The 3 witnesses," he said. "I'm moving them at 1,800. "Change it," Elena said. "Move them now, separately. Don't tell anyone except the 2 officers handling the transfers, and choose those officers yourself. Nobody recommended to you, nobody whose file you haven't personally reviewed. That's going to cause..." "I know what it's going to cause," she said. "Do it anyway." He held her gaze for 3 full seconds. Then he pulled his radio. Retention hook. What happened next happened fast. The way things happen when a plan that someone has been running for 2 weeks begins to feel the friction of resistance for the first time. Marsh had been on the radio for less than 90 seconds when he stopped mid-sentence. Elena watched his face change. "Say again," he said into the radio. His voice had gone very quiet. "Say that again slowly." She could hear the reply from 2 feet away. The words came through in pieces. Sergeant Chen quarters, door locked from inside, responding. Marsh lowered the radio. "One of the witnesses," he said. "Sergeant First Class Jennifer Chen. Her quarters, they can't get the door open." Elena was already moving. They reached the barracks in under 2 minutes. 2 MPs were outside Chen's door, one of them on the radio, and the other with his shoulder against the door in a way that told Elena the door wasn't simply locked, but barricaded. "How long?" Elena said. "Last confirmed contact was 1100, the MP said. 1400, she missed a check-in. We've been trying to reach her for 40 minutes. 40 minutes. Elena felt something cold run through her. 40 minutes while she'd been in the operations center looking at routing signatures. Get it open, she said. Ma'am, protocol requires. Get the door open or move, she said. The second MP put his shoulder into it hard. The third time the barricade inside gave and the door swung. Jennifer Chen was sitting on her bunk, alive. She looked up when the door opened, and what was in her face was not relief. It was the expression of a person who has been sitting alone for 40 minutes, deciding whether to trust anyone ever again. She was 26 years old, specialist rank, with hands that were clasped together in her lap so tight the knuckles had gone white. "Are you Voss?" she said. Elena stepped into the room. "Yes, I barricaded the door," Chen said. "I know how that looks. I don't care how it looks." "What happened?" Chen looked at Marsh, then back at Elena. "Is he safe?" "He's the reason I'm here," Elena said. "Talk to me." Chen unclasped her hands, pressed them flat on her thighs. "2 nights ago," she said, "I got a message through the base communication system. It said if I submitted my witness statement, my family would know about it. My sister's address, my mother's address." She stopped. It had both addresses, correct, with street numbers. The room went absolutely quiet. "Who sent it?" Elena said. "It was routed through base communications. By the time I figured that out, by the time I tried to trace it, there was no record. It was gone. But it came before the statements were due." "Yes. Which means someone knew you were a witness before the witness list was formalized." Chen looked up. "I told 2 people, my CO and Sergeant Price, because he was handling the administrative coordination for—" She stopped. "Price?" "Yes," Elena said. Chen pressed her hands harder against her thighs. "He's been trying to intimidate me into silence this whole time." "Not just you," Elena said. "But you're the one who barricaded her door instead of complying, which means you're the most important person on this installation right now." She crouched down to Chen's eye level. "I need to know what you saw in Kessler Valley, Sergeant. Every detail, starting from the beginning." Chen looked at her for a long moment. The kind of look that is really a measurement. How much can I trust this? How much do I have to trust it? What happens if I'm wrong? "They told us it was a training accident," Chen said. "Friendly fire. Wrong coordinates. Wrong timing. Communications failure. I was 300 meters out. I saw the whole thing." "And it wasn't a training accident?" "No, ma'am." Chen's voice dropped. "The strike was precise. The coordinates were correct. Whoever called it knew exactly what they were hitting and called it anyway." Pause. Major twist. Elena kept her face still. How many people in the valley knew the correct coordinates? "That's the thing," Chen said. "The command element. 6 people. And 1 comms relay position staffed by a 2-person team." She stopped. The relay team wasn't military. Elena felt the room narrow down to a point. "Repeat that," she said. "The relay team at Kessler Valley. I saw their equipment. I know what military comms gear looks like. I've been working comms for 6 years. Their equipment was not standard issue. It was—" Chen pressed her lips together, choosing the word carefully. "It was better. Newer. Private sector level." "Did you get a look at either of them?" "One of them. A woman." Chen stopped. Late 40s. Close-cropped dark hair. The cold that had been running through Elena since the operations center went absolute. She stood up, kept her voice completely level. "Did this woman interact with the command element?" "She was running the relay. I assumed she was a contractor attached to the exercise. I didn't think—" Chen stopped. "I didn't think contractors got to call in strikes." Elena said nothing for 3 full seconds. Behind her, she could feel Marsh absorbing this, fitting it against what he knew, arriving at the same destination she was arriving at. Margaret Calloway had not just routed the communications through her office. She had been physically present in that valley. She had been at the relay position when the strike was called, and she had come to Fort Carson today, had sat across a folding table from Elena, and told her Harlan was a distraction, had warned her in time to save exactly 3 days of carefully curated logs, because Elena getting close to the right answer was more useful than Elena getting nowhere at all. Because the right answer, the 3 days of logs, the price connection, the intimidated witnesses, all of it pointed cleanly to a mid-level conspiracy centered on Harlan. A narrative that was compelling and documentable and completely deliberately incomplete. A narrative that stopped well short of a relay position in Kessler Valley, and a woman with close-cropped dark hair running equipment that shouldn't have been there. Elena had not been deployed as an investigator. She had been deployed as a cleaner, handed enough evidence to close the case at the right altitude, ensuring the case never reached the altitude where it became something else entirely. She had 48 hours, maybe less, before whoever was running Callaway decided Elena had done enough and recalled her. She pulled out her phone, dialed Vera, the witness in Kessler Valley. She said the moment the line connected, the relay team, 2-person, private sector equipment, 1 female late 40s close-cropped dark hair. A silence. Then, Elena, don't say anything else on this line. Answer me. I said don't. Vera. Her voice went to a register she rarely used, the one that had come out of years in places where the wrong word got people killed, and the right word was sometimes the only thing standing between the mission and complete collapse. I need you to tell me right now whether you knew. The silence that followed was 11 seconds long. She counted them. Not everything, Vera finally said. I knew there was a secondary operational layer. I didn't know she was in the valley. That's not the same as not knowing. No, Vera said quietly. It's not. Elena closed her eyes for exactly 2 seconds, opened them. The math was already done. Who gave you my name for this assignment? Vera didn't answer. Who, Elena said, handed you my name and told you this was a straightforward witness intimidation case that needed a clean pair of eyes? The silence was answer enough. She gave you my name, Elena said. She picked me specifically. You're the best investigator I have access to, Vera said. She would have known that. She picked me, Elena said, because I'm credible enough to close the case at the right level, and because I have enough ego invested in my own judgment that I'd believe I'd found the truth when I found what she left for me to find. She paused. She built a machine, Vera. She needed someone good enough to run it convincingly, good enough that when the report landed, nobody would question it. What are you going to do? Elena looked at Chen, who was watching her with the focused stillness of someone who has understood that the situation in the room has just become significantly more complicated than it was 60 seconds ago. She looked at Marsh, whose hands were at his sides, steady waiting. I'm going to find out what actually happened in that valley, Elena said. Not the version she built for me. Elena, if you go outside the framework of this assignment, Elena said, is the problem. She ended the call. Marsh looked at her. Tell me what we're dealing with. The person who sent me here is involved in what happened at Kessler Valley. She managed my investigation from the start, controlled what I found, what I was supposed to conclude, and when I was supposed to conclude it. Then we're not just dealing with Harlan. Harlan is a footnote, Elena said. We're dealing with whoever authorized a private intelligence asset to run a communications relay in a live military exercise, and then call in a strike that killed soldiers. That's... Marsh stopped. The word he'd been about to say wasn't adequate for what he was hearing. That's not a cover-up. That's an operation. Yes, Elena said. And we just became the only people outside of it who know that. Marsh absorbed that. Stood with it for a moment. Then his shoulders settled, the particular settling of a man who has made his decision and is done making it. What do you need? He said. I need Chen's statement on record before anyone can reach her. Official time-stamped, submitted through a channel Callaway's office, cannot intercept. I can route through INSCOM directly, bypass everything local. Do it now. Elena said. "And get the other two witnesses, wherever they are. Bring them here." "And you?" Elena looked at the door. Beyond it, somewhere on this installation, a man with a broken jaw was consulting with a lawyer about his rights, unaware that he had gone from principal suspect to supporting evidence in the time it took him to regain consciousness. And somewhere beyond the installation, a woman with close-cropped dark hair was making her own calculations about how much time she had before the person she'd chosen to run her machine started running it in a direction she hadn't planned for. "I'm going to talk to Harlan," Elena said. "He's lawyered up." "He doesn't have to talk to me," Elena said. "He just has to sit there while I tell him a few things about the situation he's actually in. What he decides to do after that is up to him." She walked toward the door, stopped with her hand on the frame. "Lock this room," she told the MPS. "Nobody in or out except Colonel Marsh. If anyone tries to access this witness without Marsh's personal authorization, you call me directly." She recited her number. "Not through base communications, through your personal phone." "Yes, ma'am," said the MP, who had stopped trying to question her orders somewhere around the third sentence. Elena walked out into the corridor and turned toward the medical bay. She had, by her estimate, about 6 hours before the machine Calloway had built, decided she had become more of a liability than an asset. 6 hours to find the one piece of evidence that existed outside the careful architecture of what she'd been allowed to find. 6 hours to become the investigator Calloway hadn't accounted for, rather than the one she'd designed. She moved quickly. The afternoon was fading. The 1,000 soldiers outside were finishing their drills, following their orders, keeping their faith in the institution. And somewhere above all of it, at an altitude none of them could see, something much older and much darker than a simple cover-up was running its own timeline. Brett Harlan was sitting up in the medical bay cot with an ice pack against his jaw, and a lawyer beside him who had the particular look of a man who had been called in fast, given incomplete information, and was now trying to reconstruct a situation from the pieces available to him. The lawyer stood up the moment Elena walked in. "Lieutenant Colonel Voss, my client has nothing to say at this time regarding the incident on the field, and any further contact without going through—" "Sit down," Elena said. She was already looking at Harlan. Harlan looked back at her, the ice pack, the jaw, the eyes that had gone somewhere different from where they'd been when he was smirking on the field 3 hours ago. There was calculation in them now, and beneath the calculation something that Elena had learned to recognize over 2 decades of working rooms where everything was at stake: fear. The specific kind that comes not from physical danger, but from the dawning understanding that you are inside a situation much larger than you were told. "My client," the lawyer started again. "Your client," Elena said, pulling a chair and sitting across from Harlan directly, "is about to be charged with assault on a retired federal officer, obstruction of a DOD investigation coordination with a foreign-adjacent intelligence operation that resulted in the deaths of 3 American soldiers, and conspiracy to suppress material witness testimony." She paused. "Or, he talks to me right now off the record and helps me understand what he actually knew and when he knew it. Those are the 2 roads. I'd like him to pick one before someone upstairs makes the choice for him." The lawyer put his hand on Harlan's arm. "Brett, don't—" "How long have you known Calloway?" Elena said. Harlan's jaw tightened. "Not from the pain, from the name." The lawyer stopped mid-sentence. Elena watched Harlan's eyes and saw it happen the precise moment when a man who has been holding a position realizes the position has already been surrounded. "Get out," Harlan said. The lawyer turned. "Brett, I strongly advise—" "Get out of the room," Harlan said. "Wait in the hall. I cannot recommend—" "I know what you can't recommend." Harlan's voice was flat and exhausted. "Go stand in the hall." The lawyer looked at Elena, looked at Harlan, gathered his briefcase with the dignity of a man who disagrees completely with every decision being made in his presence, and has decided to document that disagreement by his posture. He went into the hall. The door closed. Harlan set the ice pack down on the cot beside him. He pressed his fingers against the swelling in his jaw, testing it like a man taking stock of damage. "How'd you know it was Calloway?" he said. The communication logs, Elena said, and a witness who put a woman matching her description at the relay position in Kessler Valley. Something moved through Harlan's face. She said there were no witnesses. She was wrong. He breathed through his nose. Once. She told me the relay team was clean, that nobody was close enough to identify them. She was wrong about that too. He looked at her for a long time. The calculation in his eyes was running fast now, recalculating, arriving at new numbers he clearly didn't like. "How long have you known Calloway?" Elena said again. 14 months, Harlan said. She approached me through a back channel. Told me she was running an authorized black operation, compartmented need to know, no paper trail by design. She needed operational coordination at a forward installation, someone who could manage logistics and communications without raising flags. And you believed it was authorized. She's the deputy director of NCS, he said. I'm a SEAL commander. She outranks me by about 4 atmospheric layers. When she tells me something is authorized, I don't ask her to show me the paperwork. What did she tell you the operation was? Foreign intelligence gathering. She said they'd embedded an asset at a series of joint exercises to monitor for signals that certain foreign interests were attempting to penetrate U.S. military communications infrastructure. He stopped. She said the relay team at Kessler was part of that, monitoring for the signals. And the strike. Harlan went quiet. The strike that killed 3 soldiers, Elena said. What did she tell you about that? She told me it was a targeting error, that the relay team's equipment had a frequency overlap that confused the automated system. She said it was a tragic malfunction and that the official inquiry would confirm that, and that my job was to make sure the witness statements reflected the malfunction narrative. So you intimidated the witnesses. I coordinated the suppression of their statements, through Price. He stopped. I did not know that included threatening Sergeant Chen's family, but you knew their statements were being suppressed. He didn't answer, which was an answer. You thought you were covering an accident, Elena said. You thought the soldiers died because of equipment error, and you were protecting a classified operation from exposure. Yes. When did you stop believing that? Harlan looked at the wall. The ice pack was melting beside him, water soaking into the cot, and he wasn't reaching for it. 6 days ago, he said. Elena waited. The relay team, he said. 2-person. The woman you're describing, Calloway, and a man. Technical specialist. His name was David Lauer. He stopped. 6 days ago, Calloway told me Lauer had died. Car accident on Route 50 in Virginia. She told me in the same breath, same sentence, the way you'd mentioned the weather. And then she moved on to talking about the witness timeline. And you understood what that meant. I understood, Harlan said, that people who have car accidents on Route 50 in Virginia do not generally have those accidents 6 days before the only investigation that could connect them to a classified strike is scheduled to reach its conclusion. The room was very quiet. You thought you were next, Elena said. I thought I was covering a malfunction, he said. I thought I was protecting an authorized operation. I thought 3 soldiers died because of a terrible accident, and my job was to make sure it didn't destroy a legitimate intelligence program. His voice didn't shake, but it thinned at the edges in the way voices thin when a person is holding something very heavy and has been holding it for 6 days without being able to put it down. Then I heard about Lauer. And I started thinking about what I actually know, what I can actually testify to, what I actually saw and documented. He looked back at her. And I realized I am the most useful liability she has. You know enough to confirm the operation's existence, Elena said, but you don't know enough to confirm the strike was intentional. Exactly. So if you testify about the cover-up, you confirm the operation was real, which is consistent with the malfunction narrative. But if you're gone before you testify, there's nobody left who was both inside the operation and outside the strike decision, he said. It stays a tragic accident, with a clean inquiry and a closed file. Elena leaned forward slightly. What did Calloway want you to do today? What was the actual instruction? Harlan looked at his hands. She told me a civilian assessment liaison was arriving. She told me the liaison was about to compromise a classified program and needed to be removed from the field before she could gather evidence. She said my job was to create an incident, something that would trigger an administrative removal. Get you escorted off installation. He stopped. She didn't tell me to hit you. But she told you to create an incident. She said to escalate until you left. She said someone with your history wouldn't back down from direct confrontation, so the escalation would have to be significant. He paused. I made a judgment call about what significant meant. A bad one. Yes, he said quietly. A very bad one. Elena sat back. She ran the picture again, the full picture. All the pieces from Calloway picking her name out of a file to Lauer, dying on Route 50, to Harlan, reading the room wrong and escalating past the point of deniability. A machine that had been running for 14 months, and the first place it had visibly broken down was a man losing his temper in front of 1,000 soldiers because his understanding of the situation was 17 layers shallower than the actual situation. Lauer, she said, tell me about him. Former NSA. Signals specialist. 30 years retired, went private sector. Harlan's voice had steadied. He was giving her information now with the efficiency of a soldier completing a mission, which was how he was processing it, not as confession, not as betrayal, as the only operational option that made sense from where he currently sat. He was the technical half of the relay team. Calloway handled the human intelligence piece. Lauer handled the equipment. Did he ever contact you directly? Once, 2 weeks before the exercise. Elena went still. What did he say? Harlan met her eyes. He said he wanted to talk to someone outside the operation. He said he had concerns about the command element's communications in the valley, specific concerns, technical ones about how the strike coordinates had been transmitted. He said the frequency that was supposedly responsible for the targeting error. He stopped. He said that frequency had been disabled in the relay equipment 3 days before the exercise began. The air in the room changed. He was saying the equipment couldn't have caused the error, Elena said. He was saying the equipment had been specifically modified so that it couldn't have caused the error, and that someone had made that modification deliberately before the exercise, which meant the malfunction narrative was constructed after the fact. Harlan's voice was completely level now. He wanted to know if I could help him get that information to someone trustworthy. And you told Calloway. A pause. 3 seconds. I told Calloway. And then Lauer had a car accident. Harlan said nothing. Elena stood up, pulled out her notebook, actual paper, actual pen, the kind of record that didn't pass through a digital channel. I need everything Lauer told you. Exact words as close as you can recall. Every conversation, every communication. I need dates, I need times, I need whatever technical details you can remember. You think there's something recoverable. I think Lauer knew the coordinates were deliberately transmitted, and he was specific enough about it to tell you. Which means he had specific evidence. Which means someone was careful enough to kill him, but possibly not careful enough to eliminate what he knew before he died. Harlan nodded. He reached for the notepad on the bedside table, the one the nurses had left for patients to write down questions for the doctor, and started writing. His handwriting was small and precise, a soldier's handwriting. Elena watched the door, counted the seconds. The lawyer was in the hall. Price was in the operations center under MP supervision. Chen was locked down with Marsh. The other 2 witnesses were being moved. And somewhere outside this installation, Margaret Calloway was running her own timeline. Her own calculations, deciding how much longer she could let this play out before the instrument she'd sent to clean the room became the room's biggest problem. She estimated she had 4 hours, maybe less. Her phone vibrated. Marsh. She stepped to the corner of the room, kept her voice down. Talk. INSCOM routing was flagged, Marsh said. His voice had gone tight in a specific way, controlled but tight. Chen's statement went into the queue, and it's sitting there. Hasn't transmitted. I've tried 2 alternates. Both are showing processing delays I've never seen before. She has reach inside INSCOM, Elena said. How is that possible? The same way it was possible for 14 months of communication logs to be routed through her office without triggering an audit flag. Elena pressed her fingers against her temple. Don't try any other digital channel. She'll see every attempt. Then how do we get the statement out? We don't route it, Elena said. We walk it out. Physical record, signed, in person. To where? Who's the highest-ranking officer you trust personally? Not institutionally, personally. Someone you'd stake your career on. A pause. General Patricia Howell, Army IG. She was my battalion commander in 2003. I'd stake more than my career. Can you reach her directly? Not through official channels. Her personal cell, yes. Call her. Tell her you need a private meeting in the next 2 hours. Tell her it's about Kessler Valley. Don't say anything else. Then come back here. She ended the call. Harlan was still writing. He'd filled 2 pages. How many people know you contacted Calloway after Lauer reached out to you? Elena said. Nobody. You're certain? I made the call from a personal device. Off base. I told no one. He looked up. I've been living with that for 2 weeks. David Lauer trusted you, Elena said, and you handed him to the person who killed him. It landed. She hadn't softened it. She watched it land and watched Harlan absorb it the way a man absorbs the weight of something he cannot undo, not with collapse, but with a settling, a compression, everything going inward. I know, he said. The only way that means anything now is if you give me everything he told you, and you are willing to testify to it. I'll testify, he said. Whatever you need. Including that you were instructed by Deputy Director Calloway to create an incident to remove me from this installation. Including that, Elena nodded. Keep writing. The next 40 minutes moved the way critical windows always move in 2 speeds, simultaneously, too fast and too slow, the details piling up while the clock outside runs a different math entirely. Marsh came back with the confirmation that General Howell would meet him at a location 40 miles from Fort Carson in 90 minutes. He'd chosen the location himself, a diner he'd eaten at for 20 years, run by a retired MP First Sergeant. The kind of place where a colonel and a general could sit in a corner booth and not attract attention. Elena pulled Chen from the locked room. The sergeant was steadier now, the kind of steadiness that comes from action replacing waiting, purpose replacing fear. Can you write? Elena said. Yes. Write your statement. Everything you saw in Kessler Valley. Exact locations, exact times, exact descriptions. The relay team, the equipment, the woman you saw. Every detail. She put paper in front of Chen. Write it like every word might be the only word that survives. Chen picked up the pen without hesitation. While Chen wrote, Elena went back to Harlan's completed pages. She read through them twice. The technical details Lauer had given him were specific enough to be damning frequency identifiers, modification, timestamps, equipment, serial classifications. The kind of details that don't exist in a person's memory unless they were directly involved with the equipment, which meant Lauer had documentation. And the documentation was somewhere. Did Lauer indicate where he kept his technical records? Elena said. Harlan shook his head. He was careful. He didn't give me anything specific. Did he mention anyone else? Anyone he trusted outside the operation? He mentioned... Harlan stopped, frowned. He said he had a brother, engineer. He said the brother didn't know what David did for work. He said that made him the safest person David knew. A name, Marcus Lauer. He said Marcus lives in... Harlan's eyes moved as he retrieved it. Asheville, North Carolina. He said Marcus has a workshop there. Electronics. Old habit from when they were kids. Elena felt the specific weight of a detail that might be everything or might be nothing, and the inability to know which it was until she was in Asheville looking at a dead man's brother's workshop. She filed it, kept moving. At 17:23 hours, Marsh left for the diner with Chen's handwritten statement and Harlan's 2 pages of notes, plus his own account of the communication logs, the price connection, and the attempted deletion. All of it in a sealed envelope. Marsh had it inside his jacket. He drove his personal vehicle. Elena stayed. She stayed because leaving was what Calloway was waiting for. Because as long as Elena was on this installation, the operation was contained. Calloway couldn't move against Marsh, couldn't reach the witnesses, couldn't sanitize the remaining log fragments without triggering actions Elena had already set in motion. The moment Elena drove off Fort Carson, the pressure lifted. So she stayed, and she waited, and she did what she always did in the dead space. Before a situation resolved, she went back through every assumption she'd made and tested it for the ones she'd made too fast. It was the specialist from the operations center door who found her. The young one, 22, the one who'd argued about the authorization card and lost. "Ma'am?" He stopped in front of her. He was holding something, a folded piece of paper, the old-fashioned kind, handwritten. "What is that?" Elena said. "A woman asked me to give it to you, about 20 minutes ago. She said you'd know who it was from." "Describe her." "Late 40s, short dark hair, civilian clothes." He paused. "She was leaving the installation, already past the gate. She handed this through her car window." Elena took the paper, unfolded it, read it. 5 words. That was all. 5 words in clean, economical handwriting. Asheville. He kept a copy. She read it twice. Then she folded it and put it in her pocket. Calloway knew about Lauer's brother. Of course she did. She'd had Lauer killed. That meant she'd investigated him first, mapped his connections, identified his risks. She knew about Marcus in Asheville. She knew about the workshop. She knew about the copy. And she had told Elena, which meant one of 2 things. Either Calloway was giving Elena what she needed to take down someone above her, using Elena the same way she'd tried to use her from the beginning, just 1 level higher on the same staircase. Or she was setting a trap. Sending Elena to Asheville to collect evidence in a controlled environment where the collection could be monitored and managed. The problem was that both possibilities led to Asheville. And the copy, if it existed, was real either way. You go to Asheville, Elena thought. You go knowing it might be a trap. You go because the evidence is real, and the only move is forward, even when the path was laid by someone who wants to use you. She thought about Vera, who hadn't known everything. She thought about Lauer, who'd known too much and trusted the wrong person with it. She thought about Chen, 26 years old, sitting in a locked room with white knuckles because she'd told the truth and it had made her a target. She thought about 3 soldiers in Kessler Valley who hadn't had the luxury of deciding whether to go. Her phone vibrated. Unknown number. She answered. "You're still on installation." It was Calloway's voice, composed, unhurried. The voice of a woman who has never once in her life been caught doing something she hadn't already accounted for. "I am," Elena said. "You got my note." "I did." "Then you know what's in Asheville." "I know what you say is in Asheville," Elena said. "Those are different things." A pause. Then, and this was the thing that made Elena's hand tighten on the phone, a sound that might have been a breath. Not performance. Something genuine. Something almost like exhaustion. "Elena," Calloway said, "I didn't sanction the strike." Silence. "I ran the relay," Calloway said. "I was in that valley. I was there when the strike went in. But the order didn't come through my channel. It came through a second command layer I didn't know existed until it activated." Her voice was even, precise. The voice of a woman delivering an intelligence assessment, not a confession. "Someone used my operation as cover, used my people, my equipment, my presence in that valley, as the explanation for how a strike could be called without going through official channels." Elena said nothing. She was listening to every word and to everything underneath the words, the pace, the breath patterns, the places where the sentence construction shifted. "Lauer figured it out," Calloway said. "That's why he reached out to Harlan. He wasn't just reporting a technical anomaly. He was reporting that the second command layer existed, that someone had piggybacked on my operation to route an unauthorized strike and intended to leave my office holding the evidence when it unraveled." "Who?" Elena said. "That's what's in Asheville." "Name," Elena said. Right now. Not a location. A name. Another pause. Longer. Senator Alan Pruitt, Calloway said. Senate Intelligence Committee, Ranking Member Oversight Subcommittee for Clandestine Operations. She stopped. The subcommittee that has been investigating my office for the past 18 months. The ground shifted, not metaphorically. In Elena's chest, in the place where a lifetime of operating against enemies who wore enemy uniforms had built its foundations. The ground moved because what Calloway was describing was not a rogue intelligence official running a private operation. It was a U.S. senator using a committee investigation as cover to run an unauthorized military strike, blame it on the office he was investigating, and then use the investigation to bury the evidence. It was not a cover-up. It was a war, a quiet one. The kind that happens in the spaces between official structures and leaves bodies in valleys and car accident reports on Route 50. You built the evidence trail pointing to yourself, Elena said slowly. And you sent me to follow it. I sent you because I needed someone outside both our structures, Calloway said. Someone Pruitt's committee couldn't touch. Someone with the access to gather evidence and the credibility to make it stick. Her voice dropped slightly. Someone who would figure out the truth even if I only gave her half of it. You were using me. Yes, Calloway said simply, and you knew that from the moment you found the routing signatures. The question is whether what's in Asheville changes what you do about it. Elena stood in the cooling air of the installation and felt the full weight of what was on the table. Not just the case, not just the evidence, not just 3 dead soldiers and a dead signal specialist and a room full of frightened witnesses, but the thing beneath all of it, the machinery that had produced it, the systems that were supposed to prevent it and had instead provided the scaffolding. I'm going to Asheville, Elena said. I know. When I have what Lauer left there, I'm going to decide for myself what to do with it. Not based on what you need, not based on what Pruitt's committee can reach, based on what 3 soldiers and a dead man are owed. Calloway was quiet for 2 full seconds. I expected nothing less, she said. The line went dead. Elena pocketed her phone. She looked at the installation around her, the low buildings, the controlled activity, the institution. Doing what institutions do, running on procedure and faith, and the assumption that the people operating the levers were operating them for the right reasons. She thought about Marsh 40 miles away in a corner booth handing a sealed envelope to a general who still believed in the floor holding. She thought about Chen's handwriting. Every word might be the only word that survives. She had 4 hours before her window closed. She had a name Pruitt that was either the truth or the next layer of the architecture. She had a dead man's brother in Asheville and whatever Lauer had been careful enough to leave behind. She went to get her car. The drive to Asheville took 2 hours and 14 minutes. Elena spent the first 40 of them on the phone and the last 94 of them thinking. Vera picked up on the second ring. You're already moving, Vera said. It wasn't a question. I'm going to need Marcus Lauer's address. He's in Asheville. Electronics engineer workshop probably registered as a business. A pause. Keyboard sounds. Elena, I have to tell you something first. Tell me while you're looking. Your assignment has been formally recalled. Orders came through DOD 2 hours ago. You are officially off the Kessler case and directed to report to the Washington field office for a debrief. Who signed the recall? It came through the Deputy Secretary's office. Pruitt's committee has reach into the Deputy Secretary's office, Elena said, not surprised, adjusting. Elena, I'm not coming in, Vera. If you continue operating after a formal recall, you're not an investigator anymore. You're a rogue asset. Everything you gather becomes contestable. Every piece of evidence is already in General Howell's hands through Marsh, Elena said. The chain is established. The witnesses are documented. What I'm going after now is the piece that makes all of it stick, the piece that goes above Calloway and lands on Pruitt directly. Silence on the line. She could feel Vera calculating the legal exposure, the institutional risk, the weight of what she was being asked to not prevent. Marcus Lauer, Vera said. Workshop is registered as Lauer Precision Electronics. Address is 1140 Haywood Road. He lives above the shop. Thank you. If you find something, I'll call you. Elena? Vera's voice dropped. The professional layer peeled back just for a sentence. Be careful with what you find. If it's big enough, being right doesn't automatically mean being safe. I know, Elena said. She ended the call and drove. The lights were on above the shop when she arrived. She knocked on the residential entrance, the door beside the workshop, the one that had a small hand-lettered card with the name Lauer in the frame. No answer. She knocked again, harder. I'm not open. A voice from inside muffled. Male. Cautious. Marcus Lauer. My name is Elena Voss. I need to talk to you about your brother David. Silence. Then the sound of something being set down, something heavy quickly. David's dead, the voice said from right behind the door now. I know. I need to talk to you about how. A long pause. She counted 8 seconds. The door opened. Marcus Lauer was 44 years old, shorter than his brother. By the look of the family photos Elena had seen in the briefing file, with the kind of hands that belong to people who have spent decades working with small, precise things. He had the specific expression of a man who has been waiting for a knock on his door for 2 weeks and has not slept well in the waiting. He looked at her. He looked past her, checking the street. Come in, he said. He had coffee going. He hadn't offered it. The pot was just there half full because he'd been running on it for days, and making a new pot was automatic now. How did he die? Marcus said. He sat across the work table from her with his hands flat on the surface. Not folded. Flat. Like he was keeping them from doing something else. Car accident, Elena said. Route 50, officially. Officially. The accident was not an accident. Marcus closed his eyes. When he opened them, something had resolved in his face. Not grief exactly. Grief had been there before she arrived. What resolved now was confirmation. The thing you dread knowing and can't stop needing to know. He called me, Marcus said. 5 weeks ago. He'd never called me about his work in 30 years. He never once said anything specific about what he did. That call was the first time. He stopped. He said he had information that was going to be dangerous. He said he needed someone he trusted outside his world to hold something for him. He sent me a drive. Said if anything happened to him, I should give it to the right person, but not to trust anyone official until I could verify they were the right person. How were you supposed to verify? Marcus looked at her steadily. He said the right person would tell me his real name for it, not his cover name, not his clearance name, the name I called him when we were kids. Elena held his gaze. I don't know that name, Marcus. I only knew your brother through what he told Commander Harlan and what Harlan told me. She paused. So I can't pass your brother's test. I can only tell you that 3 soldiers died in Kessler Valley, and David figured out why, and he was killed because of what he figured out. And the person who ordered that strike is still operating, still untouchable. Unless what David put on that drive is what I think it is. Marcus looked at her for a long time. The kind of look that is really a question, and the question is not about the words but about the person saying them. He called me Bug, Marcus said quietly. David. He called me Bug from when I was 3 years old. I used to chase lightning bugs in the backyard and catch them, and he thought it was the funniest thing he'd ever seen. He stopped. He said the right person would know his real name. I'm telling you that name because you're the first person who came here and told me the truth instead of a story. He stood up, went to the back of the workshop. She heard him moving something behind a panel from the sound of it. He came back with a flat metal case about the size of a large paperback book. He set it on the table. I opened it, he said. I know I wasn't supposed to, but he was my brother and he was dead, and I needed to know what got him killed. What's on it? Elena said. 2 things. He sat back down. The first thing is technical logs from the relay equipment in Kessler Valley. Frequency modification records timestamp data equipment serial numbers. He annotated them, his handwriting in the margins of the logs. He was documenting that the frequency malfunction couldn't have happened, that the equipment had been modified before the exercise to make it impossible. And the second thing, Marcus pressed his lips together. Audio. Elena went very still. He recorded the strike being called, Marcus said. From the relay position. He was running the equipment, he had access to the feed. He recorded the moment the strike coordinates were transmitted and the voice that transmitted them. Who is it? Elena said. I ran it through voice analysis. I have the software. I do audio engineering for a friend's studio. It's just a hobby, but I have the tools. He met her eyes. The voice doesn't match anyone on the official chain of command for that exercise. I checked every name I could find. It doesn't match Calloway. It doesn't match any military officer. But you identified it. I didn't. Not at first. He reached under the table and came up with a laptop. Turned it toward her. On the screen was a voice analysis graph, 2 waveforms overlaid. But David left a note with the drive, a document, 1 page. On it he wrote a name and a title. He wrote cross-reference this voice against Public Testimony Archive C-SPAN. Marcus tapped the screen. I cross-referenced it. Elena looked at the 2 waveforms. The match confidence at the bottom of the screen read 94.7%. Beside the graph, David Lauer's typed note, Richard Cass, Chief of Staff, Senate Intelligence Committee. Reports to Chairman Alan Pruitt. Pruitt's Chief of Staff called in the strike, Elena said. From outside any military command structure, Marcus said. Using my brother's equipment, while my brother was standing right there and didn't know what was happening until it was already done. The room was quiet for 10 seconds, long enough for the full weight of it to settle. Richard Cass, a civilian, a political staffer, standing in a valley with equipment that belonged to an NCS black operation, routing strike coordinates through a channel that would leave Calloway's fingerprints on the transmission and Calloway's operation as the explanation, while Pruitt's committee investigated Calloway from above and prepared to bury her with the evidence of the very crime his own office had committed. A frame, not a cover-up. An active frame constructed in advance with moving parts and a fall person and a dead signal specialist and 3 soldiers who had been in the wrong valley at the wrong moment and had paid for it with everything. There's a second audio file, Marcus said. Elena looked up. I almost missed it. It was embedded in the technical logs disguised as a calibration recording. Marcus reached over and clicked something on the laptop. It's David. He recorded himself. The audio began to play. David Lauer's voice came through the laptop speaker slightly distorted, recorded on equipment not designed for voice capture, but clear enough. He spoke the way engineers speak, direct and organized, like he was dictating a report. If you're hearing this, something happened to me. I want you to know what I saw and what I know so that it doesn't disappear with me. The strike on Kessler Valley was authorized outside any military structure. I was at the relay position. Margaret Calloway was running the human intelligence coordination. I was handling the equipment. We were told the exercise was a monitoring operation. Signals intelligence. I believe that until the morning of the exercise when I saw the 3rd member of the team arrive. A pause in the recording, the sound of breathing. I was told there were only 2 of us, Calloway and me. The 3rd person was not introduced. He handled a secondary transmitter I had not been informed about. I recognized him not personally, but I recognized the type of equipment he carried and the way he handled it. Private contractor, not NSA, not NCS. Something older and less accountable than either. His name. The name I heard Calloway use when she spoke to him was Garrett. No last name. I couldn't find any official record of anyone by that name attached to any operation I had clearance to access, but I found something else. Another pause. 3 years ago, an operator named Thomas Garrett was officially listed as KIA in a classified operation in Eastern Europe. His file is sealed. His death was confirmed by 2 witnesses whose identities are also classified. He is officially dead. He was standing 12 feet from me in Kessler Valley. He is not dead. And whatever he is now, he is not operating under any authority I can identify. The strike coordinates were transmitted through his secondary unit, not through mine. The frequency that was supposed to have malfunctioned my frequency was already disabled. The transmission that killed those soldiers came through a channel that doesn't exist in any official record, operated by a man who doesn't officially exist, while the equipment attached to my name sat inactive. Whoever finds this. David Lauer's voice dropped slightly, took on a weight that had not been there a moment before. Tell my brother I was trying to do the right thing. I should have done it faster. I'm sorry I didn't. The recording ended. Marcus reached over and closed the laptop. He didn't say anything. Elena didn't say anything. In the silence, there was the sound of the street outside, the ordinary sound of a city that didn't know any of this existed. Thomas Garrett, Elena said finally. I tried to find him, Marcus said. After I heard the recording, there's nothing. Officially, he's been dead for 3 years. Officially, Elena said. David said he's not. No, Elena said. He's not. She pulled out her phone. I need to copy everything on that drive. Multiple destinations, multiple formats. How fast can you make copies? Give me 8 minutes. Make it 6. That. Marcus moved faster than she'd expected. The hands that worked with small, precise things, proving useful in a different context. He copied the drive to 2 separate external units, encrypted both with passwords he gave her on a handwritten card, and printed a hard copy of the technical logs and David's typed note. Elena was already distributing while he worked. She sent one encrypted copy to Vera's personal address, not her official account, with a single line of text. Don't open until I call you. If you don't hear from me in 4 hours, open it and take it to the IG directly. Not I, NSCOM, not DOD directly. She sent a second copy to Marsh through the same personal channel they'd established. She called him while it transmitted. He picked up immediately. Tell me. Pruitt's chief of staff called in the strike. David Lauer recorded it. I have the audio and the technical documentation. I'm sending it to you now. A silence. She heard Marsh breathe, heard him reorient. General Howell needs to see this tonight, he said. She will. There's a complication. Elena paused. There's a third member of the relay team, listed KIA 3 years ago, operating under the name Garrett. He's the one who physically transmitted the strike coordinates. A ghost operator. Someone running completely outside any official structure, which means Pruitt has been building this capacity for at least 3 years, which means Kessler Valley is probably not the first time Garrett has been used. God, Marsh said quietly. The moment Pruitt's office knows Howell has this, they'll move, Elena said. How long do you need? Howell can have people in motion in under 2 hours if I get her this now. Send it to her directly. Encrypted personal. Don't route through any official channel. She paused. David, there's also a second. The lights went out, not a flicker, an instant. The whole workshop, the whole block from the sound of it went black. Marcus went completely still across the table. Someone cut the power, he said. He didn't say it with panic. He said it the way his brother would have said something technical, precise, factual, and absolutely aware of what it meant. Elena was already on her feet. Is there a back exit? She said. Door at the rear of the workshop, leads to the alley. How many entry points to this building? Front door, rear workshop door, the residential entrance we used. He stopped. Fire escape window on the 2nd floor, but you'd have to go upstairs. 3 entry points. She didn't know how many people were outside. She didn't know whether they were here to surveil or to act. She didn't know whether the power cut was a pressure tactic or a preparation. She knew that in the 3 years she'd spent in Delta doing exactly this kind of work, a power cut before entry was almost always a preparation. Take the drive copies, she said, both of them. Put them inside your jacket. What about the hard copies? Leave them. Paper slows you down. Where are we going? Away from the entry points, Elena said. She moved toward the back of the workshop, keeping low, putting the work tables between herself and the front windows. Stay close. Don't use your phone. Are they going to hurt us? It was a direct question asked, without shaking, with the directness of a man who needs accurate information to function. They'll hurt us if we're convenient, Elena said. We're going to be inconvenient. They were 4 feet from the rear door when someone tried the front door. A single rattle, testing, not forcing, the kind of rattle that precedes a decision. Elena put her hand on the rear door's handle. They were in the alley before the front door opened. She heard it behind them. Not the sound of forced entry, which meant they had a key or a pick, which meant these were professionals. She moved fast, Marcus beside her, keeping pace without being told, following her turns without question. Left, right, through a gap between buildings. She was running a counter-surveillance route she was constructing in real time, using the layout she'd memorized on the approach, and the instincts she'd built in 23 years of operating in situations where knowing the route before you needed it was the difference. 2 blocks out, she stopped. Listened. Nothing behind them. Her phone vibrated. Unknown number. She hesitated. Answered. The alley was a good call. Calloway's voice, as composed as it had been on every previous call, as if she were watching a board game from a comfortable distance. You sent them, Elena said. No, Calloway said. I'm telling you who did. Pruitt's security people. 2 of them. They've had a watch on the Lauer workshop since David died. They were waiting for someone to show up. They were waiting for you specifically once the recall didn't bring you in. Pruitt's office monitors recall compliance. A pause. They won't follow you beyond the immediate area. Their instruction was to acquire, not to... She stopped. Not to escalate beyond acquisition. You're very well informed about their instructions. I've been watching Pruitt's operation for 11 months, Calloway said. I know his playbook better than his own people do at this point. Then you know about Garrett. The pause that followed was different from Calloway's previous pauses, shorter, but denser. I know about Garrett, she said. He was in the valley, Elena said. Your operation. Your relay position. A man you didn't know was coming who used your equipment as cover to rout an unauthorized strike. And you recognized him. Yes. You knew Garrett. I knew who he was, Calloway said carefully. I knew what he was. I didn't know Pruitt had him. I didn't know he would be in that valley. But when you saw him... When I saw him, Calloway said, I understood exactly what was happening. And I understood that anything I did in that moment, anything would be used against me. If I tried to stop the strike, I'd be the officer who compromised a military exercise. If I reported Garrett's presence, I'd have to explain what he was doing there, which required explaining what I was doing there, which was an unauthorized black operation that my own committee was investigating. A breath. I was trapped before the strike was called. Garrett was the trap. Elena stood in the space between 2 buildings in Asheville, with the encrypted drives inside Marcus Lauer's jacket beside her and the sound of a city going about its evening, and felt the full architecture of it for the first time. Not as pieces, as a whole. Pruitt had been building this for 3 years, a private operator officially dead, running outside any accountable structure. A committee investigation that gave him access to everything Calloway's office was doing. Access he used not to provide oversight, but to find the perfect vehicle for an operation he could then cover with the investigation itself. 3 soldiers dead in a valley. A signal specialist silenced on a highway. Witnesses threatened and suppressed. An investigator her deployed to clean it all up at exactly the right depth, and underneath it the question she hadn't asked yet. The one that made everything else make sense or fall apart. Why? Elena said. Why did Pruitt want those soldiers dead? The longest pause yet. Because one of them, Calloway said, was carrying documentation out of the valley. Hard copy. Physical. Something he'd taken from a communications intercept that connected Pruitt's office to a foreign financial arrangement that had been running for 8 years. She stopped. Not a policy disagreement. Not a political operation. Money. Specific traceable foreign money flowing into accounts controlled by people who work for Pruitt. Elena closed her eyes. He killed 3 American soldiers, she said, to protect a bribery arrangement. He killed 3 American soldiers, Calloway said, because one of them had the one piece of evidence that could put him in a federal prison for the rest of his life, and he had an asset in place, and he made a decision. Her voice went flat. The documentation that Soldier was carrying is gone. Destroyed in the strike. But David's audio proves Cass transmitted the coordinates, and Garrett's presence proves the private channel existed. Combined with the financial records I've been building for 11 months, you have the financial records, Elena said. I have 11 months of them. And you've been waiting. I've been waiting? Calloway said, for someone to build the operational evidence that connects Garrett to the strike command. Because my financial records prove the arrangement existed, they don't prove the strike was its direct consequence. A pause. Your evidence does. Elena opened her eyes. You need my evidence, she said. I need your financial records. Yes, Calloway said. That's why you sent me to Asheville. That's why I've been running this from the beginning, Calloway said. I needed an investigator with enough credibility to make David's evidence stand in front of a court. I needed them to get there before Pruitt's people sanitized the Lauer workshop. And I needed them to understand what they were building toward before they built it. You could have told me this on day 1. If I'd told you on day 1, you'd have spent the first 3 hours trying to verify whether I was telling you the truth, instead of following the evidence to its natural conclusion. Her voice held something that was not quite apology and not quite justification. Something in between. You trust what you find more than what you're told. I needed you to find it. Elena thought about 3 soldiers in a valley. A man recording himself in the dark, saying he was trying to do the right thing, and he was sorry he hadn't done it faster. She thought about what it cost using people the way Calloway used them. The collateral of it. The weight. She thought about Pruitt, a United States senator making a decision to kill American soldiers to protect money that wasn't supposed to exist, and going home that evening, and sleeping and waking up and going to work, and sitting on a committee that provided oversight of the intelligence services. Send me the financial records, Elena said. Everything you have. Already in your secure inbox, Calloway said. I sent them an hour ago. Of course you did, Elena said. Elena. The name came out differently than it had before. Not as a handle. Something closer to the real thing. What happened in that valley was wrong. I was there, and I couldn't stop it, and it has been the worst weight I've carried in 30 years of doing this work. I need you to believe that, even if you don't trust anything else I've said. Elena thought about it. Thought about whether believing it changed anything. It doesn't matter whether I believe it, she said. What matters is whether the evidence holds. She looked at Marcus, who was standing beside her, holding 2 encrypted drives inside his jacket. Watching her face with the careful attention of a man who has understood that the situation is much larger than a dead brother, larger than a workshop in Asheville, larger than anything he was prepared for when he opened his door an hour ago. It'll hold, Elena said, and she meant it. Because David Lauer had been meticulous. Because Chen had barricaded her door instead of complying. Because Harlan had looked at his own hands and understood what they'd been used for. Because Marsh had steady hands and a dead soldier to account for, and a 30-year commitment to the floor holding. Because the floor was still holding. Just barely. Just enough. We need to move, she told Marcus. He nodded. No questions. He was already moving. They drove in Marcus's car because Elena's rental was known. He didn't ask where they were going. She told him anyway because he'd earned it, and because the brother who'd trusted the wrong man and paid for it deserved at least this someone telling the person he loved the truth, plainly, without management. We're going to meet a general, she said. Army IG. She has the preliminary evidence. We're bringing her the rest. And then what happens? Then she moves through channels I can't move through. Channels that are protected enough that Pruitt's committee can't touch them. And Pruitt. Pruitt gets arrested, Elena said. if the evidence holds. Will it? Your brother was meticulous, Elena said. It'll hold. Marcus drove. His hands were steady on the wheel, the same way his hands were steady on small, precise things in the workshop. Not because he wasn't afraid, but because steadiness was the only useful response to the situation, and he was the kind of man who understood that. They'd been driving for 11 minutes when Elena's phone rang. Vera. The recall escalated, Vera said. The professional layer was completely gone now. What was left underneath was a woman who had been running her own calculations for the past hour and had arrived at a number she didn't like. Someone filed an emergency rogue asset designation. It came through the Deputy Secretary's office 40 minutes ago. There will be federal marshals looking for you within the hour. Elena didn't react outwardly. Marcus glanced at her. She kept her voice flat. Who filed it? The request originated in the Deputy Secretary's office, but the Deputy Secretary didn't sign it. His Chief of Staff did, on delegated authority. Pruitt's reach goes into the Deputy Secretary's Chief of Staff. Apparently. A pause. Elena, if federal marshals pick you up while you're carrying evidence from an unauthorized investigation. The evidence isn't from an unauthorized investigation, Elena said. It's from David Lauer's brother, a private citizen who received material from his deceased sibling and is voluntarily surrendering it to a federal officer. She looked at Marcus. You're surrendering it voluntarily. Say yes. Yes, Marcus said. I heard that, Vera said. Then you heard the legal distinction. Elena checked the side mirror. Nothing yet. I need 90 minutes. Keep the copy I sent you sealed until I call you or until 4 hours pass, whichever comes first. And if 4 hours pass, then you take it to the IG yourself and tell them everything I told you. Don't go through DOD. Don't go through NCS, directly to IG. Elena. 90 minutes, Vera. She ended the call. Marcus said nothing for 30 seconds. Then, are they going to arrest you before we get there? Not if we move right, Elena said. Drive faster. Marsh called at the 40-minute mark. His voice had the tight compression of a man juggling multiple live situations simultaneously and keeping them all airborne through sheer discipline. Howell has reviewed everything I gave her. She needs the audio. I have the audio. I have the technical logs, the financial records Calloway sent, and Harlan's written statement. She says if she has all of that in her hands tonight, she can move through the DOJ National Security Division before Pruitt's committee opens tomorrow morning. He paused. But she needs it tonight, in the next 2 hours. We're an hour out. Drive faster. Someone already told me that. Elena. His voice dropped. She also told me something else. I need you to hear it clearly. Go ahead. Pruitt called an emergency closed session of the Intelligence Committee 40 minutes ago. He's presenting a motion to formally censure Calloway for the Kessler Valley strike. He's filing charges. He's moving first, trying to make himself the prosecutor before any of this evidence reaches anyone who can make him the defendant. The car felt like it contracted around her. The timeline she'd been running compressed by half. How long does a censure motion take? She said. In a closed emergency session with a quorum already present, he could have a preliminary finding by morning. Marsh's voice was controlled and precise. If he gets a finding, even a preliminary one, he controls the narrative. Everything becomes about Calloway's misconduct. The investigation, the trial, the coverage. The Lauer evidence becomes a defense exhibit in Calloway's case instead of a prosecution exhibit in Pruitt's. Elena closed her eyes for 2 seconds, opened them. Call Howell, she said. Tell her I need a direct line, now. Howell called back in 4 minutes. Her voice was the voice of a woman who had commanded battalions and investigated institutional corruption for 30 years and had built through all of it the specific kind of authority that comes not from rank, but from never once having been wrong about what the evidence said. Lieutenant Colonel Voss, Howell said. I've read what Marsh sent me. Tell me what you're bringing. Audio recording of the strike coordinates being transmitted by Richard Cass Pruitt's Chief of Staff. Voice matched at 94.7% to public testimony archive recordings. Technical documentation from David Lauer proving the frequency malfunction narrative is physically impossible. David Lauer's own recorded statement naming Cass and identifying the ghost operator Thomas Garrett as the secondary transmitter. Elena paused. And 11 months of financial records from Calloway's office documenting a foreign bribery arrangement connected to accounts controlled by Pruitt's people. Silence on the line. The working kind. If the voice match holds to forensic standard, Howell said, and the financial records are what Calloway says they are, this is sufficient for a federal grand jury referral. I know. You've been formally recalled and designated rogue asset. Technically, anything you gathered was given to me voluntarily by Marcus Lauer, a private citizen who received it from his deceased brother as personal property. I haven't gathered evidence in my official capacity since the recall. I've been a private individual receiving voluntary disclosure. Elena kept her voice even. The designation is Pruitt's play. He knew I was close. Howell was quiet for 3 seconds. That argument will be tested. I know, but it'll hold long enough. Get here, Howell said. 90 minutes is too long. Make it 60. Yes, General. The line went dead. 60 minutes, Elena told Marcus. He pressed the accelerator without a word. She called Harlan on the road. His lawyer picked up, of course, and started the same sentence he'd started 3 times already about client advisement and proper channels. Put him on, Elena said. Tell him it's Voss, and it's about Garrett. 30 seconds. Then Harlan. What do you need? He said. No preamble. The lawyer was still in the room. She could feel it. But Harlan had stopped running the calculation of what cooperation cost him, and started running the calculation of what silence cost everyone else. I need a recorded statement about Thomas Garrett, Elena said. Right now, on your phone. I need you to describe every interaction you've had with him, any contact, any documentation, anything that connects his name to Pruitt's operation. I told you I don't know Garrett. You told me you didn't know the person in Kessler Valley was Garrett, Elena said. I'm asking whether you've encountered that name before in any operational context. A pause, longer than it should have been. Brett, she said quietly. 3 soldiers, a dead signal specialist, a 26-year-old sergeant who barricaded her door because someone threatened her mother. Your name is already in this. The only question is which side of it you end up on. The pause extended. She heard him breathe. 4 years ago, he said, I was pulled into a compartmented assessment. Personnel evaluation whether a specific asset was suitable for a long-term deep cover role that required a convincing death of identity. The asset's name in the assessment file was Garrett Thomas. The evaluation concluded he was suitable. I co-signed the assessment. Elena went very still. You signed off on staging Garrett's death, she said. I assessed his suitability for an operation that required his official death. I didn't know at the time who was running him afterward, or for what purpose. His voice was completely flat. The assessment was legitimate. I had no reason to believe the operation it fed into was not. But you co-signed. Yes. Which means your name is in Garrett's original operational file. Yes. Which means Pruitt has had leverage over you, Elena said, from the moment he pulled Garrett out of that file and started using him. You co-signed the paperwork that built the ghost. You were always going to be the person he used to suppress this if he needed to. That's why Calloway chose you as the mechanism for removing me. Not because you were convenient, because you were already compromised and didn't know it. The silence on the other end was the heaviest kind. The silence of a man understanding the full shape of what he's been standing inside and finding it much larger than he'd seen. Make the statement, Elena said. Everything. Garrett, the assessment, the co-signature, Calloway's instruction to remove me from the field. All of it on record right now. My lawyer is going to... Your lawyer, Elena said, cannot protect you from what Pruitt will do to you once he has his preliminary finding and doesn't need you as a contingency anymore. I can, but only if the statement exists before morning. She heard him turn to someone in the room. A brief exchange muffled. Then he came back. "Recording," he said. "Go." He went. 3 minutes and 40 seconds of clean, precise, organized testimony from a man who had spent his career in environments where clarity under pressure was survival. When he finished, he said, "Is that enough?" "It's enough," Elena said. She ended the call. Marcus glanced at her. "Is he going to be okay?" "He's going to face consequences," Elena said, "for what he knew and what he did. But he'll face them on the right side of this." "Is that the same as okay?" "Sometimes it's the best version of okay that's available," she said. Marcus thought about that, nodded once, kept driving. They were 22 minutes out when Calloway called. Elena answered, and before she could speak, Calloway said, "I know what Pruitt is doing in the committee room right now." "So do I." "Then you know that by the time your evidence reaches Howell and Howell gets a grand jury referral filed, Pruitt will have a preliminary finding he can use to block or delay every step of that process." Calloway's voice was calm, completely unreadably calm. "He'll have 3 months minimum of legal scaffolding to hide behind. By the time that scaffolding comes down, Richard Cass will have left the country. Garrett will be relocated. The financial accounts will be restructured." "I know. There's one way to stop him tonight," Calloway said. "Before the finding is issued, before the window closes." Elena said nothing, waiting. "I walk into that committee room," Calloway said, "voluntarily, right now, with my financial records as a voluntary evidence submission." A pause that held something Elena couldn't name. A voluntary surrender by the subject of a censure hearing transforms the proceeding. It converts it from a motion hearing into an evidence review. Pruitt loses control of the room. His motion gets tabled pending review of my submission. The chairman is required by rule to accept it and call a recess. "You'll be arrested," Elena said. "Probably." "Calloway, I was in that valley," Calloway said. "I ran the operation that gave Pruitt his cover. I suppressed the witnesses. I managed your investigation to protect my own exposure." Her voice was precise and honest in a way it hadn't been at any previous point in their conversation. "I am not innocent in this. I have been trying to bring Pruitt down without having to account for my own part in the conditions that made him possible. That was—" She stopped, restarted. "That was wrong, and I have been aware that it was wrong for 11 months. Elena sat with that for 3 seconds. "If you go in there tonight," she said, "everything you hand them becomes part of the official record, including your records." "Yes." "You'll lose your position, your clearance, everything." "Yes." "And Pruitt will make sure you're prosecuted to the maximum extent of anything they can make stick." "He'll try." A small sound that might have been the ghost of a laugh. "He's going to be somewhat occupied." Elena thought about the machine Calloway had built. The precision of it. The patience. 11 months of financial records. An investigator chosen for her credibility and her stubbornness. Every piece positioned in advance. And now the last piece, the builder of the machine walking into the room where the machine was most needed and using herself as the final component. "You planned this part too," Elena said. "I planned for the possibility," Calloway said. "I hoped it wouldn't be necessary." Another pause. "Tell David Lauer's brother that what his brother found matters, that it will be in the record, that his name will be in the record. I'll tell him." "Elena." The name again. The real version of it. "You were exactly who I needed you to be. I'm sorry I wasn't honest about why from the beginning." The line went dead. Elena sat with the phone in her hand. She looked at Marcus. He had heard enough of it from her side to understand the shape of what had just happened, if not every detail. "She's going to take the fall for part of it," he said. "She's going to take accountability for her part of it," Elena said. "There's a difference. Not a comfortable one, but a real one." Marcus thought about that in the way he thought about most things, quietly, thoroughly, without rushing to a conclusion that fit better than the truth. David would have appreciated that distinction, he said. They reached General Howell at 11:47 at night. She was in a conference room at a federal building, not the Army IG's official office, which was potentially compromised, but a room in the DOJ National Security Division building that had been arranged in the last hour through channels Elena didn't ask about, and Howell didn't explain. Howell was 63 years old with close-cut silver hair and the bearing of someone who had spent decades making decisions that landed on real people and had learned to live with that weight without being crushed by it. She shook Elena's hand. She shook Marcus Lauer's hand, and when she did, she held it for a moment longer than protocol required. "Your brother's work," she said to Marcus, "is going to matter. I want you to hear that from me directly." Marcus nodded. He didn't trust his voice enough to use it. They sat down. Elena laid out everything on the table. The encrypted drives, Harlan's recorded statement, her own account of the investigation from the moment she'd arrived at Fort Carson to the moment she'd walked in this door. Howell's team recorded everything. 2 attorneys from the National Security Division took notes. It took 1 hour and 18 minutes. When it was done, Howell sat back and looked at Elena with the specific expression of a person who has just completed a full picture and is now measuring what it costs. "Calloway walked into the committee room 40 minutes ago," Howell said. "I've been getting updates. The session was recessed 20 minutes after she entered. Committee chair invoked evidentiary review rules. Pruitt's censure motion is tabled pending review of her submission." "He'll fight it," Elena said. "He'll try." Howell's voice was matter-of-fact. "Richard Cass has been placed on administrative hold pending review. My office filed that the moment Marsh gave me the voice match. He's not going anywhere." She paused. "Thomas Garrett is going to be harder. A man with a staged death and no official existence is difficult to locate through official channels. David Lauer's technical logs document the specific equipment serial numbers Garrett was carrying at the relay position," Elena said. "That equipment has manufacturer tracking. It was purchased through a procurement channel that will have a paper trail." "We'll find it," Howell said. She was already thinking 3 steps ahead. Elena could see it in the way her eyes moved. "Senator Pruitt will be referred to the DOJ for investigation. That process will take months. It won't be clean. He has lawyers, and he has allies, and he has resources, and he will fight every step." "But the evidence holds," Elena said. "The evidence," Howell said, "is the strongest thing I've seen come across this table in 11 years in this role." She looked at Marcus again. "Your brother understood what he was carrying. He was careful with it." Marcus looked at the table for a moment. "He always was," he said, "with everything that mattered." Elena left the DOJ building at 1:15 in the morning. The rogue asset designation was suspended pending review. Howell's team had moved on that within the first 30 minutes of the meeting, establishing the voluntary disclosure framework Elena had argued to Vera on the phone. It wasn't fully resolved. Nothing at this altitude resolved cleanly or fast. But the immediate threat, the marshals, the detention, the clock was off. She stood on the sidewalk for a moment in the cooling air of a night that had been carrying too much weight for too many hours. Her phone rang. Marsh. "How did it go?" he said. "It went." "Is it enough?" "It's enough to start," she said. "Whether it's enough to finish that depends on 100 things we don't control." "That's true of most things worth doing," Marsh said. She almost smiled at that. "How are the witnesses?" "Safe. Chen asked me this evening if she was going to have to testify in open proceedings. I told her probably yes." He paused. "She said good. She said she'd been ready to say what she saw from the moment she saw it. She just needed someone to make it safe to say." Elena held that for a moment. "The soldier who died in the valley," she said. "Your soldier." "Corporal James Reitman," Marsh said. The name came out quietly, not raw exactly, carried. 24 years old. He'd been on my installation for 7 months. Smart kid. Too smart for the work we were giving him. He found the financial documentation in the valley. He saw something in a communications intercept and he printed it. He was carrying it out when the strike hit. Marsh's voice stayed steady. He knew what he had. He was bringing it out. He was, Elena said. That'll be in the record. It'll be in the record, she confirmed. His name, what he found, what he was doing when he died. A silence that wasn't empty. The kind that holds something too large for words and isn't trying to. Go get some sleep, Elena, Marsh said. You've done enough for one day. She almost laughed. Is that an order, Colonel? From me to a retired Delta Force Lieutenant Colonel, absolutely not, he said. It's a request. From someone who's been watching you run on nothing for the past 12 hours. She said goodnight, ended the call. Marcus was beside her. He'd been there the whole time, quiet in the way of someone who has learned in the past several hours that the world his brother moved in was very far from the workshop on Haywood Road and is still integrating that knowledge. What happens now? He said. The DOJ opens a formal investigation. The committee hearing gets reconstructed under new terms. Cass gets charged. Pruitt gets investigated, and eventually, not quickly, not cleanly, but eventually he gets charged. She paused. Calloway faces her own accounting. Some of what she did was legitimate. Some of it wasn't. A court will sort that out. And Garrett. They'll find him. It'll take time. But the equipment logs your brother kept are specific enough that there's no version of the world where a man leaves no trace with that level of documented gear. Marcus looked at the sky for a moment. The particular look of someone measuring the distance between what is and what was. He used to say. Marcus said that the job of a signal specialist is to make sure the right message gets through, that every other consideration, the technology, the protocols, the security layers, all of it exists to serve that one function. He stopped. He got the message through. He did, Elena said. It took longer than it should have, but it got through. Senator Alan Pruitt was formally referred to the Department of Justice for criminal investigation 31 days later. The referral cited conspiracy to commit murder, unauthorized use of military assets, bribery involving a foreign national obstruction of a federal investigation, and the illegal deployment of a covert operator in a domestic military context. Richard Cass was indicted 6 weeks after that. He did not leave the country. Thomas Garrett. Born Thomas Allen Weaver, age 47. Operator of record in 11 classified engagements between 2009 and 2022, was located in a rented property outside Charlottesville, Virginia, through the equipment serial tracking Elena had identified. His arrest was handled by a joint DOJ and DIA team on a Tuesday morning without incident. Margaret Calloway pled guilty to 2 counts of obstruction and 1 count of unauthorized operation of a clandestine asset. She was sentenced to 18 months. She served 14. She did not appeal. Commander Brett Harlan faced disciplinary proceedings for his role in the witness suppression. He cooperated fully throughout. His cooperation was noted in the final recommendation. He accepted a reduction in rank and a dishonorable discharge that the board ultimately reduced to a general discharge under honorable conditions. He didn't contest the reduction. He said when asked by his attorney whether he wanted to fight it, that some things you don't fight. Some things you carry. Sergeant Alan Price was court-martialed. He was convicted on 3 counts and sentenced to 6 years. Sergeant First Class Jennifer Chen's testimony was entered into the official record of the grand jury proceedings and the subsequent trial. Her name appeared in the final judgment. When a reporter called to ask her how she felt about that, she said she felt like she'd done her job. Then she went back to work because that was what soldiers did. Colonel David Marsh received a commendation from the Army Inspector General for his role in preserving witness integrity and establishing the evidentiary chain. He put it in a drawer. He said he'd been doing his job. He said his job existed because the institution needed people willing to hold the floor even when it shifted. He said he intended to keep doing it. Marcus Lauer returned to Asheville. He reopened the workshop 2 weeks after the DOJ building meeting. On the wall above his workbench, he put a photograph of him and his brother, the 2 of them, as kids. Marcus, with his hands cupped around something bright, David beside him laughing. Below it, he put a small typed card with one line from David's recorded statement, "I was trying to do the right thing." And Lieutenant Colonel Elena Voss, retired, cleared of the rogue asset designation, the subject of a formal commendation from General Howell that she accepted and immediately forgot about. Drove back to the life she'd been living before a manila folder and a gas station coffee had put her on the field at Fort Carson on a morning that started with a slap and ended with the slow grinding, imperfect machinery of accountability beginning to move. She was not under any illusion that the machinery would be clean or fast or final. She had been inside too many institutions, seen too many cases, close and reopen, watched too many verdicts that satisfied the law without satisfying the truth, to believe that what started here ended here. But it started here, with a woman who didn't move when she was expected to, with a soldier who printed a document and put it in his pocket and started walking out of a valley, with a signal specialist who pressed record and aimed a microphone at the moment history was happening and trusted that someone eventually would find it. The floor had shifted. It had cracked and groaned and let people fall through it who should never have fallen. But it had held, not because of the institution, not because the institution was trustworthy or clean or honest or immune to the pressure that power applies to the structures that are supposed to contain it. It held because of the people inside it who decided one by one in their separate moments of decision that truth was not negotiable and silence was not the same as safety, and the right thing was still the right thing. Even when doing it cost everything. The floor held. That was enough. That had to be enough. And sometimes, on the best days in the cases that actually closed, it was.